All right, everyone. So thank you for joining us and welcome to today's installment of Loan Repayment 101 on repayment calculators. My name is Lindsay Burcham and I manage the Financial Wellness at Penn program. Today I'm going to serve as a moderator throughout the workshop. We'll pause periodically during today's presentation to answer questions submitted by the audience. So please feel free to send your questions directly to me throughout the presentation using the chat, and I will direct them to Paul when we pause. Now, before I introduce our guest, I want to share a few disclaimers. First is that today's session is going to be recorded and the video will be hosted on our website later. If you don't want to be featured in this video, I'd recommend you leave your camera and mic muted, and we'll share the video with all attendees after the presentation. Additionally, I want to clarify that while today's session is intended for graduate students, we welcome undergrads as well in attendance, and we hope that today's workshop answers some of your questions about your student loan options. So I'm pleased to introduce today's guest. Today's workshop will be led by Paul Gerard, founder and president of PG Presents LLC, an independent student loan consulting company. Paul is a well-renowned and respected student loan expert, especially in the graduate and health professions communities. We're very excited to have him with us today to share his student loan expertise with all of you. So thanks for joining us, Paul, and I'll hand it over to you now.
Thanks a lot, Lindsay. Hi, everybody. We're delighted to have you with us. Lindsay sent me a listing of not the individual names, but the degree programs you guys are from. And even though we've got a relatively small group, we've got a terrific representation of the different degree programs at Penn. So thanks to all of you for being part of this. We've got a lot of information to cover, but I want to start out by perhaps stating the obvious. And Lindsay, that is simply that one of the reasons calculators are so important is that how else are you guys going to pick a repayment plan with a payment you can comfortably afford if you haven't taken a look ahead of time, excuse me, at what the repayment options are? And a little sidebar on that is you're going to see, and some of you may already know this, your loan servicer, this is of course the third party that works with the Department of Education to work with you in repayment. Until they hear from you, they're going to assume you're going to do a standard 10-year level plan. And if you can happen to afford that, well, that's great. That's a time-driven plan. And just another sidebar on that, when you go in online before you graduate and look at your loans with the loan servicer, you may actually see a standard 10-year payment amount sitting out there due in X number of months, but that's only because they don't know yet which repayment plan you're going to choose. So number one, the calculators help you pick the repayment plan and prevent you from being dumped into a plan you don't want. But the second reason it's really important to know how the calculators work, and we're going to look at several of them today, is that you really should never be surprised at what the payment amount is. And we're delighted to have any undergrads with us, but we've got a lot of grad students, mainly grad students, and more than a few of you, as you probably know, are going to use an income plan, either pay as you earn, known as pay, or revised pay as you earn, known as repay. There's a federal formula for those payments. Well, if you're choosing one of those plans and you apply for it, and the loan servicer comes back with a payment that's not even remotely close to what you were expecting, you ought to be able to go to the loan servicer and say, where did you come up with this? I'm on a calculator and I put my information in and got the following payment. Where did you get this one? So one of the reasons to use calculators is to prevent yourself from being surprised. Now, before we get into the details, a quick reminder, Lindsay, we've got one more of these on the agenda, December the 9th. We're going to do a workshop on federal consolidation with the federal government, direct consolidation, and also refinancing your loans with a private lender. And although I think everybody will find these beneficial, certainly those of you from dentistry, veterinary medicine, and Perelman, I think you're certainly going to find this to be of interest, especially on refinancing. So a little unabashed plug, Lindsay, for the December 9 workshop. Okay, now some reminders before we dive into the calculators. I have been doing this a long time. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm an expert, but I'm always saying keep it simple. And I know we've got some folks, Joe Manning and some folks from the grad team, glad to have you guys with us. Anytime you're looking at repayment, guys, keep it simple. Find a plan where the required minimum doesn't break the bank. I mean, something that fits comfortably in your budget. And we've said at previous workshops, Lindsay, as you know, comfortable means different things to different people. But I just don't run into borrowers when we do individual counseling who want to be in a repayment plan where there's absolutely zero wiggle room. No, find a plan where the minimum payment's comfortable, set it up on automatic debit so you know it's coming out of your account every month. You'll get a little bit of a discount for that. And then decide if you want to overpay or not. And if you want to be aggressive, well, then overpay on the most expensive loan. That's the one with the highest interest rate. Or in some cases, some of you might want to just pick off the smaller balance loan. So psychologically, you can say, I got that one taken care of. But also, once you find that minimum required payment, if you're trying to qualify for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which we've had a separate session on, you wouldn't overpay. Why would you overpay on your debt if in fact you're trying to qualify for public service loan forgiveness? But number one, just find a plan that comfortably you can afford. We encourage you to look at the time plans first, the 10 and 25-year plans, and then at the income plans like pay and repay. And a quick little reminder about that's coming up. And Lindsay and I were talking about this before we started this session. We know it's frustrating when you get in repayment, you pay for a while and you don't see your balance coming down. I mean, that's bound to be frustrating. That happens with us all the time when we're talking with some of the borrowers that we work with. But guys, your debt is not going to come down until you pay more than the outstanding interest that's due. I'm going to show you an example of that here in just a moment. Now, quick reminder, and if you were on the earlier workshops, you saw this, but if you missed the earlier workshops, a quick reminder that of all the repayment plans out there, and I think there's something like 13 or so, they all fall into one of two categories. The payments, guys, are either based on a time period or they're based on income. And those time-driven plans, 10 or 25 years, they tend to be level plans, the same payment every single month. They don't have a thing to do with income. They have the payment calculation has nothing to do with your marital status or, does he or she have any student loan debt? How you file your taxes has nothing to do with that. The servicer just takes your debt and your interest, principal and interest, and spreads it out over a time period. If you make minimum payments at the end of the term, the debt's gone. But I want you to look at that third bullet under time driven. If you use a level time driven plan, your principal balance will start to come down immediately. I'm going to show you an example of that in a moment. That's why we always encourage you to look at a time driven plan first. If you want to see the debt come down right out of the gate, guys, that's the plan to use. Many of you, though, can't afford that because of the big gap we talked about between your debt and your income. That's when you use an income-driven repayment plan like pay or repay. Look at the second bullet. The payments change every year on income and family size. And this is where you run into challenges. The income plans are affordable, but if the gap is really big, and I'm talking to a lot of you here, especially I'm going to pick on the folks from Perelman or a dental school graduate who's doing advanced dental education in a hospital-based residency program. You got all this debt, you're making maybe mid-50s, if that, in terms of a stipend. You got to use an income plan. You can't afford anything else. And in that case, the payments will not cover the interest. But those are the plans, time-driven and income-driven plans. Now, extremely important, and Lindsay, I know I say that a lot, but you gotten used to it. The loan servicer is going to determine the amounts. But like I said, when we first started this, you should just never be surprised at what they're coming up with. Now, when I say they have their own calculators on their website, it's just they have their own version of calculators with their own headings on it and all that kind of stuff. But the calculations with an income plan, they're from a federal formula. Every single repayment calculator that looks at income plans, they use the same federal formula. So whether your servicer's Navient or Fed Loan Servicing or Great Lakes, or you're using the calculator that we're going to look at studentaid.gov, it's one set formula. So you should never be surprised at what the numbers are. Now, back up to that first bullet. Documentation, guys, has just never been more important than it is now. But if you were to buy a car, a house, mortgage, et cetera, you get what's called a disclosure statement. The lenders are required to send to you a document that says, this is what you borrowed, here's the interest rate, here are the monthly payments, here's the total interest you're going to pay over the course of the repayment term, and this is the total amount you'll pay over that repayment term if you never overpay. You're going to get a disclosure statement from your loan servicer. So watch for that and keep it, because that's going to list your payments. Now, I want you to look at bullet 3. We're going to look at all these calculators, and many of them, probably most of them, let you upload your federal student debt from studentaid.gov. Many of you have been on there, I hope. If you go with studentaid.gov, this is the old National Student Loan Data System site, or that's where the database is. Guys, when you go to that site and you go to the dashboard, you'll see all your borrowing to date, including any accrued and unpaid interest. And so when you use these calculators we're going to look at, more often than not, you can just upload the debt straight from there. But what if you're a, I don't know, third-year dental student or a second-year veterinary medical student? Okay, you got more borrowing to come. So the calculator is going to upload what you've got to date. But for you to get really good numbers, you're going to have to go in and add prospective borrowing. And we realize you may not know exactly what you're going to borrow in future years, but just give it your best shot, because your numbers are going to be off if you're still in school and you haven't borrowed everything. Excuse me. The last thing, and we're going to show you an example of this, with a time-driven plan, the numbers are going to be off a little bit unless you account for accrued interest. Simple example, the median debt right now for MD students, for allopathic, is about $200,000. I think Perelman's under that, but don't quote me on that. But that's the national kind of median, according to the Association of American Medical Colleges for MD students. Okay, so if somebody asked you how much debt you borrowed and you said 200,000, and you put 200,000 into a calculator, that's really not accurate, because over the course of 4 years of medical school and 6 months of a grace period, your interest has been accruing all during that time. So it's not really 200,000 when you enter repayment. It's more like about 230,000 with repayment. Now I'm going to show you an example of that. Some simple reminders, Lindsay, as we get started. All the calculators, you've got to know the assumptions they are using in their numbers. And these are common sense. Any of you could have probably come up with these. For a time-driven plan, if you look at the 10-year number, you can overpay if you want to, but the calculator has no clue you might do that. So for a time plan, 10-year standard or 25-year extended, the calculator assumes you hold the loan to term. That simply means that you make the minimum payment all the way through. And when you look at some of the numbers on a 25-year term, the interest will be enough to choke a horse. I'm going to show you that in a moment. I'm kind of setting you up for some numbers here. For the income plans, the calculators, guys, are great, but they're not mind readers. So if you go to the calculator and it asks you, as it will, are you single or married? And you say, I'm single, it's going to run all the repayment for the income plans based on you being single all the way through repayment. For some of you with your level of debt, that may be the case. Sorry, bad joke there. If you say you're married, it's going to assume you stay married all the way through repayment. So for the income plans, it assumes no change in marital or tax filing status or family size. If you're married and you've got no kids right now, but you're planning a family, the calculator has no clue about that. So that's what can make these a little challenging, because things do change family status over the course of repayment. By the way, for the income plans too, I hope you're aware of this. We covered this in an earlier session. If you're using an income plan like Pay or Repay, these calculators also assume you never miss the renewal deadline. Guys, remember, with an income plan, you have to renew every year. The loan servicer gives you ample heads up about that. But if you're late, they don't know what to do with you. Interest capitalizes. They throw you in a higher payment. So the income plans on the calculators assume you are Johnny on the spot every year renewing. Also on the income plans, the calculators have to assume a set annual increase. For example, I think the calculator from the Association of American Medical Colleges and the calculator with the dental school programs and maybe the veterinary medicine, I'm not sure. I think they assume somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2.5%, 3%, but they will note it. If you look in the help section, it will tell you what the annual income increase is. By the way, let me single out veterinary medicine here for just a moment. We work with a lot of veterinary medical school graduates. And at least as I understand it, and I hope I don't botch this, you may have an income, a set income of, let's say, $85,000. But you also may get, I think it's called a production increase based on how many animals you help in a particular month. I hope I'm saying that right respectfully. Well, the calculator has no clue about that. So if you put in 85,000, but you're really making about 105, you might want to go back to the calculator and kind of estimate what your increase is going to be on an annual basis and use that number. For all the plans, the calculators have no idea, are you going to aggressively pay or take a break in payment? So they assume you're doing everything on time, no additional payments. And then the last thing, and this shouldn't impact you guys now, but it might later. The calculators assume you're starting out repayment right now. That's one reason, I know, Joe, I'm always picking on you and Lindsay and those of you who are doing some counseling. That's why these are great when you're counseling borrowers who are about to graduate. And those of you who are about to graduate, or you certainly will be at some point, they're great for that because they give you an idea about what the repayment's going to be from the beginning. But when we do counseling sessions and somebody's been in repayment for 4 or 5 years, it's really difficult to use some of the calculators because it thinks you are starting out right then when you've already been in repayment 3 or 4 years. So those are some very important assumptions to the calculators. All right, so which calculator should you be using? Let's take a look here. Okay. We're going to look at basically 4 different ones, 2 in particular. We're going to look at an interest-only calculator. We're going to look at something called finaid.org. I call this the quick and dirty calculator. I'll show you why in a minute. One calculator we're going to spend a little bit of time on is the loan simulator with the federal government. I call it the what if calculator, and it's got some major bugs in it, but some things it does. There's some things it does really bad, but there's some things it does really, really well that will help you. And then we're not going to look at the individual calculators in terms of screenshots, but I do want you to know that at least if you're in dentistry, medicine, or veterinary medicine, there are 3 superb calculators designed specifically for your discipline. And Lindsay, I kind of apologize to others on the call, grad students and or other graduate professional programs and nursing and all. I'm not aware of any discipline-specific calculators just for you guys, but I think these calculators here will help pretty much the masses. So there's a listing, by the way, of the discipline-specific ones, and I'll get back to those here in a moment. Okay, so right out of the gate, and by the way, guys, we've got 11 folks on here. If you want to do this along with me, perhaps on your phone, or if you can multitask, which I'm sure you probably can, feel free to do this. This would be an interesting exercise. You certainly should do this before you graduate. We're going to look at an interest-only calculator. I want you to go to Google and just type in interest-only calculator. You're going to get several, I'm going to show you a screenshot here in a minute. You're going to get several different websites that are going to pop up. I'm going to suggest you use the one that says calculate stuff. We actually referenced this one before. And in the fields, and you'll see this, go ahead and put in, your anticipated debt when you graduate. I think they've got 250,000 already programmed into it. So change it to what you think you're going to have when you graduate and enter repayment. Use an average rate on your loans. I'm going to use 6%. Of course, all the rates right now are at 0, courtesy of the CARES Act, but I'm going to use 6%. If you've got a pretty good idea about what your average is, put that in there. But the example I'm going to use is 6. Change the term to 10 years. That doesn't mean you're going to pay it in 10 years. And then change the interest-only period. I'm using 3 years for a minimum residency in medicine, and you can actually put 1 year in there if you want to. The resulting number you're going to get is the monthly interest you'll owe on your debt every single month. And this is where I remind you, until you cover that and more, your principal balance is not going to come down. So here's what it looks like. And Lindsay, I tried to get the Home Depot ad out of there, but there it is. Okay, so we calculate stuff, the interest-only calculator. I'm putting in $112,000. Now you're going to see this here in just a moment. My assumption is this is a 2-year nursing student. He or she is borrowing $50,000 a year, a direct unsub and grad plus each year. The average rate is 6%. And so $12,000 has accrued in interest by the time the borrower enters repayment. So this to me is a $100,000 borrower, but I want to be realistic, and I've run the numbers, and there'd be about $12,000 in interest accumulate, can you believe it, over those 2 years. Now watch what happens. I changed the rate to 6, the term to 10, 3-year interest only period. Look at the interest only payment for this borrower, about $560. And I'm probably throwing a lot of numbers at you here, but go back to the $200,000 average for medicine. The interest only payments around $1,100 a month. And so in this particular case, this borrower, if I were meeting with you, or Joe or somebody from his team were meeting with you, and you were a nursing student, and you came out and said, you know, what are my options, and what am I looking at? And you had borrowed $100,000 for nursing school, and we're entering repayment in the fall of your graduating year, and you said, what do I have to pay just to cover the interest? That's the number you're looking at. Very important that everybody do that. I'm going to come back to that number in a moment. So that was the first calculator, an interest-only calculator. And Lindsay, I just happen to like this particular one. There are others out there. And a quick plug for the dental loan organizer and calculator and the med loans organizer and calculator. And Lindsay and Joe and team, this is something I want to be sure you guys see. Those calculators will actually put the interest amount on the spreadsheet for the borrower. So if you're using that calculator, you will know what your monthly interest payment needs to be. Okay, second calculator is finaid.org. Now I call this the quick and dirty calculator, because if you want to do a quick estimate of what your payments are going to be on a time-driven plan, you know, what would my payment be over 10 years? You know, how bad would it be? What would my payment be if I took it from 10 years to 25 years? What would that payment be? This is a calculator to use. You can use it. I mean, it'll take you like 1 minute to do it. I use this all the time. This will also help, by the way, for those of you who might later on consider refinancing your loans with a private lender. And we're going to talk about that in December at the next workshop. This is where you go, you know, I'm not doing public service. I don't need an income plan. Why am I sitting here with $100 bajillion in debt at an average rate of 6% or whatever it happens to be on your portfolio? Why can't I lower my payment? The refinance lenders use time plans. Their time periods are usually something like 5, 7 or 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 years in repayment. And so finaid.org is a great way to say, well, if I had $200,000 and I refinanced it at 4% and I used an 8-year plan, repayment plan, what would it be? This is the perfect calculator to do that on. This calculator, though, doesn't accommodate different interest rates on different loans. So for example, if you are coming out of veterinary school and you've got 4 direct unsub loans and you've got 4 grad plus loans, I hope you know this. Each one of those loans has a different interest rate. Now, again, right now, all the rates are 0, but the statutory rate you're required to pay at some point, they're all different, they're all fixed. With finaid.org, you'd have to go in 8 different times and individually enter those to get an accurate number, which you wouldn't do. You just lump them all together and do an average, which is what I'm going to show you here in just a moment. This calculator is extremely easy to use, and here's why. They've kind of changed the facing of it. If you go to finaid.org, this is what you get. And if you look up over on the right, and I hope you can see it, I try to put some arrows in here. You guys are smart. You probably used this before. If you hover over calculators in the drop-down box, the first thing you'll see is loan payment. So if you click on loan payment, this is what you're going to get. Now, remember, I'm trying to be consistent here. So Lindsay, I put in $112,000. I'm accommodating the interest that I've already calculated is going to build up for this nursing student over 2 years at $50,000 apiece. So I put in 112, that's the number at repayment. I'm using an average rate of 6%. I put in the most egregious, aggressive plan of 10 years. And remember, you don't pick a plan, that's what they're going to put you in. Zero loan fees, and I put a minimum payment of $50. And I want you to notice what we get when we hit calculate. It's that simple. This borrower would pay about $1,243 a month over 10 years. Look at the number of payments, 120. There's your 10 years. This calculator, remember the assumptions. This calculator says this borrower would never overpay. They'd make $1,243.43 cents every month. They'd set it up on automatic debit to get a little bit of a discount. And over the course of 10 years, they pay just over $37,000 in interest. Okay, so you borrow $100,000, you pay 140 something thousand back. All right, so that's on a 10-year plan. Now go back to what I said in one of the very first slides. I know I'm repeating myself, but I hope this will help. Find a plan you can comfortably afford. So if you ran this and you went, you have got to be kidding. There's no way I could do this. And this is just on 100,000 or 112 with the interest. Your second option is a 25-year plan. Now, I don't know of anybody, Lindsay, who would stay in the plan for 25 years. That's not the intention. You're trying to find a plan where the required minimum's comfortable. You can always overpay with no penalty. So just hit recalculate, go back, change the 10 years to 25, hit calculate, and now take a look at the payment. The monthly payment dropped pretty dramatically, like about $500, down to $721. But look at that total interest paid. I forget what was on the previous slide, 37,000. So we went from 37,000 to over 100, almost 105,000. Okay, that's assuming you stayed in the plan for 25 years and you never overpaid, which I can't imagine in my wildest dreams you would do. So this is a very, very simple, easy to use calculator for quick and dirty calculations on time-driven repayment plans. Now go back to the first calculator. If I've got my numbers right here, and Lindsay, I checked them and rechecked them. I hope I got this right. I think in the first one, the interest only calculator, we said this student who borrowed 100,000, whose accrued interest was 12,000, and now it ended up being 112,000, average rate of 6%. We said the calculator said that the interest due every month was $560. Remember what I said in the slide about time-driven plans. You always cover the interest and more if you use a time plan. Look at the numbers, they're right there. Both these plans, 10-year and extended 25-year, your balance is going to come down immediately. Now, common sense says it's going to come down a lot faster if you're using the standard 10-year plan. But again, can you afford that? It depends on what your income is and how much you borrowed, et cetera, et cetera. So right out of the gate, run the interest only number, find out what that is. Next step, go and look at the time plans. You may know you can't afford them. Guys, look at them anyway. All right. I mentioned that accrued interest is going to be, or the numbers in your calculator are going to be off if you don't account for the accrued interest. Again, for a 3-year, for a law school student, that'd be 3 years worth of interest accrual plus the 6 months. I think we've got somebody from Wharton on here. I hope I've got that right. I'm not exactly sure. Eons ago, my MBA program was just over a year. I'm not sure how long y'all's is, but let's say it's a 2-year program or you're doing a master's program for 2 years, then you'd have 2.5 years of interest. If you're dental school, 4 years and 6 months, et cetera, et cetera. Studentaid.gov, if you use that site to upload your debt into a calculator, studentaid.gov has the accrued interest. It will show it. So if you're uploading from that site into your calculator, that's going to be correct. So that upload should be accurate. And again, if you haven't, if you're not in your last year, you're going to need to go in and prospectively add some additional debt in there. But just studentaid.gov, you're going to see the amount of interest. It's also on your loan servicer's website. And remember, y'all know this, I hope, Direct Unsub and Direct Plus, those are unsubsidized loans, interest accrues all during school and the 6-month window period, then interest capitalizes. And again, a reminder, right now, no interest on your loans. The interest accrual impact. This borrower that we've been working with, let's just be consistent, Lindsay, with our numbers. If we said, oh, it's a nursing student and he or she borrowed 100,000, if you ran the 10-year number without interest accrual, it's about 1,100 a month. But as we did, if you run it with interest accrual over 2 years and 6 months, it's 1,243. Now, some folks might say that's just not a huge monthly payment difference. I mean, to me it is 150, almost 150 bucks, but that's on 100,000. What if you're coming out of Penn and you got 150 or 200 or $250,000? Very important that you always include interest accrual. Okay, Lindsay, let me stop and see, has anybody asked any questions, or have I completely confused everybody, or is everybody numb?
Yeah, no questions have come through yet. So again, if you have any, please send them directly to me throughout the presentation, and I will share them with Paul. But yeah, nothing has come through so far.
Okay, good. I say this.
Oh, Paul,
I'm sorry. I think a lot of this is kind of sort of common sense. Did we have some come in?
The audio is distorting like it happened before. Do you want to try to briefly leave and come back again?
Yeah, I got that before. I'll shut it up right back. All right, so I'll be right back. I'll be 2 minutes.
Hey, Paul, it looks like you're back. Do you want to unmute for a second to see if it's fixed?
Test 1, 2, 3. How we doing there?
You sound great. And actually, so we are not seeing the slides right now. We're seeing Zoom. Yep. If you want to adjust your screen, but we did have a question come through.
Okay, I'm bringing it up. I'm bringing it up right now. Hang on a minute.
Okay.
There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, go for it.
Lovely. Okay, so, and actually we have a second one. So question number 1 is, with interest rates at 0%, is there an opportunity to lock that rate of 0% for the life of the loan?
Yeah, good question. You're not the first person to ask that. The answer to that is no. First of all, the only way you lock in a rate on your, super question. The only way to lock in a rate on your federal loans is to consolidate, because when you consolidate all your loans, you pay them all to zero. I mean, you pay the balances to zero and you replace it with one new loan. You trade debt for debt. The rate is calculated at a weighted rate of all the loans you have, what their interest rates are. It's rounded up 1/8 of a point. That's only 0.125%. And then it's fixed for the life of the loan. Here's the challenge. Number 1, you can't consolidate while you're in school. And number 2, if you were out of school and you were able to consolidate, even if the rates were 0, when the consolidation loan is figured, when the rate's calculated, they don't use the current rate of 0. They use what we call the statutory rate that's assigned to the individual loan. So great question, but no way to do that.
Great. Thank you for that answer, Paul. So the second question we received is, you said if the student doesn't choose anything, meaning a specific repayment plan, the standard 10-year plan will be chosen for the student. Where/how can students make their choice for which repayment plan? Is that on the student aid website, or is that with the loan servicer?
Yeah, great question. Here's what routinely happens, and this does happen. I mean, it just does. Whoever your loan servicer is, and I know I'm repeating myself, guys, but again, we go back to like the very first session, and Lindsay, as you know, the very first module we did for you guys for the financial wellness program was like simple steps. And simple steps is what'd you borrow, who's got your loans, who's your loan servicer, and when do they come due? Okay, here's how you find this out. When you graduate, let's say you graduate in May, fairly typical graduation date. You got a 6-month window period on these loans. Let's suppose that you've got direct unsub. You got 6 months before they come due. The loan servicers will notify you anywhere from 90, 60, 30 days out from the time that your loans are coming due, and they'll say your grace period's about to expire, time to select a repayment plan. So the loan servicer, you got to be sure you know who it is and that they've got your correct contact information, but they will contact you about selecting a repayment plan, and hopefully would help you figure out the best one, although by then I hope you will know. Now, what Lindsay's heard me say time and again is, I encourage you to be proactive. You know, if you graduate in May, your loans are coming due in November, December. So if you haven't heard from your loan servicer by about September or October, for goodness sakes, contact them. Great question. They will contact you.
Perfect. And we have one more question. So this is coming from a student in the dental school. And they're wondering, if we are targeting public service loan forgiveness, which repayment plan would be ideal?
Yeah, two things. First of all, I know this was recorded. I'd strongly encourage you to go back and listen to Lindsay, which one was it? Number 2, I think. We did a session on income-driven repayment plans and public service loan forgiveness that's recorded. And you can get information on this there. Also, we do work with the American Dental Education Association. If you go to their site, you'll see a whole series of modules, Nupur, that will answer this question as well. But the easy answer is, if you're interested in the public service loan forgiveness program, for example, if you're interested in academic dentistry, you have to use an income plan. You cannot use a time plan. You have to use an income plan, because part of the eligibility requirements are 120 payments, 10 years worth, with an eligible plan. And Nupur, I hope I'm saying that right. My apologies if I'm not. That's an income plan. You're going to have to use pay or repay. I hope this is okay since we have a relatively small group. Nupur, I'd encourage you to, if you can't find that, reach out to the Student Financial Services, FSS, or we'll get you information on how to exactly go through the eligibility requirements. That's relatively simple. You're most welcome.
Awesome. And one more question. So will you talk a little bit about capitalization, and if you recommend, if possible, paying off some or all interest prior to capitalization?
Yeah, real quickly. Great question, Susan. As I think you guys know, all this interest is accumulating, and as of the 2012-13 academic year, the government, in its infinite wisdom, sorry for the editorial comment, I'm speaking on behalf of me, not Penn, but you guys might support me in this. The government got rid of all the subsidy for grad and professional students. That simply means that all this interest is accruing, and at some point, it's usually at repayment 6 months out, it's going to be added back to the principal. Should you pay it or not? Well, if you can pay it, if you have a way to do that, and you have a family member who can help, a partner, a spouse, or someone who can help, there's certainly wisdom in trying to pay it down before the end of your 6-month grace period, because that simply means when you enter repayment, your principal balance will not go up because somebody has paid all that accrued interest for you. Those of you who had what are called subsidized loans in college, the government did that. If you borrowed $3,500 in a subsidized loan in college, when you graduated and entered repayment, it was still worth $3,500. Interest had accrued, but the feds had paid it for you. Nobody does that in grad school. So Susan, if somebody can do that, depending on what their repayment strategy is, that's clearly not a bad idea. This is probably a longer discussion, but if someone has got the funds or a family member or somebody to help with the accrued interest before it capitalizes, but that borrower, go back to Nupur, is thinking about public service loan forgiveness, now you've got an interesting question. Do we go ahead and pay that, knowing that that might be part of a balance to be forgiven tax-free in 10 years? Do we go ahead and pay it, or do we put that money aside somewhere, perhaps for other use, cash fund for emergencies, retirement, a Roth IRA, because we're hedging our bets that it's not going to matter, that balance is going to be forgiven to public service loan forgiveness? Susan, great question. That's why we have sit downs in detail with borrowers to look at their repayment strategy, where their funds are coming from, etc. Great questions, Lindsay.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. Thank you everyone for submitting questions. No more are in the chat. So go ahead, Paul, and we'll take more questions later on.
And we're gonna fly through this, but again, it's being recorded, and all these websites are available for you guys to look at. And I think we're kind of teeing up Joe and his team to do some additional counseling here. Okay, next calculator, studentaid.gov, the loan simulator. I call this the what if calculator. And by that, I mean, if you're sitting there going, yeah, well, what if I get married? Should I file jointly, separately? This calculator will show you that. What if I'm married and adopt a child, or adopt, twins, or I'm married and we have triplets? What if my family size changes? What if I'm working, COVID's now hit, and maybe my spouse or partner was working and now they've lost their job or their hours have been cut back? How does that impact my monthly payments? This is the perfect calculator for it. Now, I say all this as respectfully as I can. This is a great calculator if you know how to use that. Don't take that the wrong way. It's great for certain things. It's horrible for others. The government is, I'm a little surprised they released it with some of the mistakes they've got in it, but if you know what you're looking for, it's terrific. And I'm going to show you exactly what to look for here when we go through these calculations. All right. And if you want to try and follow along on your own calculator or computer, knock yourself out. When you go to that website, you see it at the bottom, studentaid.gov/loan-simulator. This is the old repayment calculator that they used to have there. This is what you're going to see. And you're going to, if you scroll down, and this is a screenshot. If you scroll down, you'll see log in or start from scratch. I'm going to show you that in a moment. But here's what I'm going to suggest you do. And you might even consider, guys, printing out this particular slide. Lindsay, I think you sent copies to them of a PDF of these slides. Is that right?
Yeah, and they'll get the slides after as well.
Great. Okay, good. You guys will see this. You might want to actually print this out and kind of stick it aside here. I'm going to encourage you to skip the prompt questions. Here's why. The calculator thinks it knows, after you answer certain questions, it thinks it knows the best repayment plan for you. I respectfully say it doesn't. So I'm going to encourage you to skip all the questions about repayment objectives and public service loan forgiveness and all those, and go right to skip guided questions. I'm going to show you that in a second. Once you get there and you enter information, you're just going to hit continue until you see something that says view results. You won't miss it, I assure you. And then you look for the box that says view and compare all repayment plans. Here's what it looks like. When you go to the first main site and you scroll down, there you see it. Log in from start from scratch. I start from scratch because, let me see if I can get this to move here. There we go. You can load in your debt if you want to. I don't have student loan debt, so I just manually do this. But that's what you want to look for over on the right. You won't miss it if you know where to look. Look for skip guided questions. And then there you see it, personal information, loan information, and repayment goals. This is what I want you to notice. If I can get this to move here, there we go. It's going to default, horrible choice of words, sorry, to tax filing status single, family size of 1, and the income will be blank. I've put 75,000 in. I'm trying to be, again, kind of consistent using a nurse. Salaries can be all over the place, but I'm going to use 75,000 working in the great state of Pennsylvania, which was very much in the news this past week. All right, so single family size of 1. This has 0 to do with the repayment options for time-driven plans like 10 and 25 years, but it has everything to do with your income plans. So that's what you put in. If you loaded your debt in, it'd show 112,000. I manually put that in, so it'll show you your debt. And then once you scroll down to compare all plans, here's what you've got. Now I'm watching the clock here, Lindsay. I think we're gonna sneak this in here. The plans are shown not in a table. I wish they did it that way. They show plans 3 across. So look at this, a lot of numbers, but I put arrows in to help you. The first one is the 10-year plan. That payment should look familiar, $1,243. That's exactly what we came up with earlier. And notice the payoff date. Remember what I said about assumptions. You never overpay. Well, it's, basically October, November of 2020, add 10 years, there you go. Nothing to forgive, the debt's gone. There's your 10-year plan. We turn right around with finaid.org. We did the same thing with the 25-year plan. That's the exact same number we got. And notice the payoff date. Well, it's 2020, add 25 years, 2045. So those numbers, as I said, those numbers are accurate for the time plans. Now, the plans, if you scroll down, you get another row of plans. And I want you to look over at the right. Now, remember what we did. I'm going to go back here. We said single, family size of one, $75,000. Look at the monthly payment, the first monthly payment. It even says first. Look at the monthly payment for repay, $466. So if you can't afford that nasty 10-year or the 25-year plan, there's a significantly lower payment. Now, quick little sidebar here. If you attended an earlier session or you've done any research on repay, you know that for grad students, the repayment term is 25 years. If you look right under this 466 at payoff date, repay says payoff date in 20 years. That's an example of this total calculation being wrong. It's off by 5 years, but guys, trust me, that 466, that is the correct payment based on single, family size of one, salary of 75,000. And if you go to the next line, there's the exact same number for pay as you earn. Now, if we had more time, I'd quiz you on this, but Lindsay and Joe and company, I hope you guys all know the reason those numbers are the same with pay and repay is that the calculation of payments is done exactly the same way for these plans, 10% of something called discretionary income. Now, I said this was the what if calculator. So what if this nurse decides to get married? Okay, go back to the personal section, personal information section. In the drop-down box, let's first run it, married filing jointly. Family size is now 2. There's your income. There's spouse's income, $50,000. All right. Notice the arrow that says apply changes. You got to tell the calculator redo this. So hit apply changes. And now look what we get. Filing jointly, 75,000 income plus 50,000 in income, family size of 2. Notice the repay payment is $826. Take a wild guess what the payment's going to be with pay. Exactly the same, because with both these plans, if you're married filing jointly, spousal income's going to count. You should not be surprised so far at what you're seeing with these payments being the same. Well, guess where we're going now? Married filing separate. What if you go, well, I don't want to count my spouse's income? Well, go right back into the drop-down box, married filing separately. Same information, be sure you hit apply changes. You see that big fat arrow saying apply changes. Okay, well now wait a minute. Why is the repay number still 826? Easy answer. Repay always counts spousal income. You'd know that from one of the first sessions we did and the repayment charts we've got. Repay always counts spousal income. But we told the calculator you're filing separate. Pay as you earn lets you exclude spousal income when you file a separate return. And so notice how low the payment goes. If we get rid of the 50,000, we still get to count 2 in the family. Lindsay, as you guys know, and Joe, you guys know, this is a simple example of the what if calculator. What if I'm married? What if he or she's making 50? And by the way, we don't have enough time to do it here. We're already running out of time. This calculator also lets you put in spousal federal debt because that helps offset the payment with somebody using an income plan. Lindsay, we got a little bit more stuff to go, but let me stop real quick and see if we got any questions that came up from that.
Nothing has come through so far. So if you want to move ahead, maybe we can just take all of them at the end.
Yeah, we'll catch up at good. And actually, this is going to work out fine. Okay, we're not going to show screenshots of all these. And again, I kind of sort of apologize to those of you. We're so glad you joined us from some of these other disciplines. As soon as I saw the list, I thought this is just great. but I'm only aware of discipline-specific calculators for dentistry, medicine, and veterinary medicine. Now, I will admit to being a bit prejudiced here. We do work as consultants for the American Dental Education Association. The Dental Loan Organizer and Calculator, which is referenced right there, this is based on the calculator, the second one there, that the Association of American Medical Colleges came up with for their medical students. There's a partnership with ADEA and the AMC to do this. Guys, I say I couldn't live without this. I could, but I couldn't do my counseling for dental school graduates without this thing. This thing is fabulous. It was developed specifically for dental students. It lets you customize your repayment based on your own career plans, including advanced dental education. After you load all your stuff in and put in projected debt if you're still enrolled in dental school, the drop-down box then says, are you going straight into practice? Are you going to go into a dental service organization? Are you going to go right into practice? It then says, are you going to do advanced dental education? And if so, what kind? Are you going to basically stay in school in an academic-based residency program, or are you going to do a GPR or a 2-year pediatrics residency? What are you going to do? And it gives you help information, terrific help information on the salaries of dentists from the ADA and for the stipends for the residency programs in dentistry. And I say I know it's in there because I'm the one who puts that stuff in there. So I think you'll find it's extremely accurate. And guys, it's free for 7 years. If you're a dental school student, why in the world would you not use this thing? It's terrific. Same thing with what was called MLOC, the MedLoans Organizer and Calculator from the AMC. Now listen carefully. This thing was developed specifically for med students. And again, similar to DLOC, again, I've got them reversed because this was the first one. This lets you go in and say, okay, I'm going to do a 3-year residency program, run the numbers based on that. What if you go, I'm going to do 3-year pediatrics and then a 3-year cardio subspecialty. It lets you add 3 years and calculate all the differences based on fellowship programs, et cetera, et cetera. This one's also free for allopathic students for 7 years. But notice the little asterisk. This is a superb calculator, frankly, for anybody, whether you're doing a 2-year program, 3-year program. There is an insanely small fee. I think it's $10 or $9.99 or something that you can use. And then I think you've got it for 7 years. I pay it. I'm not a member of AMC, so I pay it, but it's well worth it. And I don't get any, Lindsay, kickbacks for saying this, but guys, anybody can use this. You'll just have to pay a small fee if you're not medicine. It has a superb help section with information on stipends and especially salaries for attending physicians based on your specialty, as an attending physician. And it has a terrific new section for married borrowers. So this is a fabulous calculator for those of you in medicine. And then if you're in veterinary medicine, kudos to these folks. They've got it's called the Student Loan Repayment Simulator. It's developed specifically for our friends in veterinary medicine. Same thing, you can customize your own repayments strategy based on your own salary. They also have a section for internships and residencies. And Lindsay and Joe, one of the great things about this calculator is I hope people will remember, and if you haven't listened to this workshop, go back and listen to the one on income-driven repayment plans, because remember, if you use an income plan, pay or repay, and you're not using public service to pay your debt off or to retire your debt, and you don't get it retired by the end of the term with an income plan, remember the government forgives it, but they tax you on it. Well, this calculator has a terrific estimated tax section for borrowers, veterinarians who are using income plans who don't think they're going to get their debt paid off. It'll help you calculate what the taxes would be, what kind of hit you'd take if you would when your debt's forgiven. So Lindsay, kind of last thing, and then we'll open this up for questions. I'm just kind of pleading with you guys. You should never, ever, ever be surprised at what the monthly payment amount is that your loan servicer gets you. You're going to pick the plan. You know how they work. Use the calculator. Be sure you got a ballpark of what that number is going to be, and have your calculations handy whenever you talk to them, so that You know, for example, if you applied for pay and you got a number that's wildly different than you were expecting, you know, they might round it $1 or $2 different. But if it's wildly different, have your calculations up, call them and go, guys, how in the world did you come up with this number? Remember the assumptions. And also, if you're not, when you go in and upload the debt into the calculators, guys, be sure that you project future borrowing if you still have more borrowing to go. So with Lindsay will stop it there and see what kind of questions we've got.
Perfect. So feel free to send any lingering questions you have in the chat. Thanks again for joining us. And we hope that we were able to answer some of your questions about your repayment options and how to estimate your potential payment. We would greatly appreciate it if you would please complete the evaluation on the screen today. You know, your feedback really helps us adapt these workshops for future audiences. So please, please, please let us know what you thought. Yeah. Oh, someone asked if we can put the link in the chat. So we will follow up via email with everyone who attended and share the link to the evaluation, the link to the recording, as well as a copy of the slides. So you will get this via email.
Yeah, and we really do appreciate it. Guys, this is kind of the first crack we've had at doing this series this fall. And, you know, one of the many things I'm guilty of is I tend to think I know what you guys need when maybe I don't. So just take a minute and do this. It'll really help us know how to do these in the future. Susan, thanks for your comments. Paul Brown, everybody, we really appreciate that. Please, everybody, stay safe. Interesting times. Be well. Have a great time at Penn. And thank you guys, Lindsay, for including me in this. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.